All right, I'm gonna speed this up a little bit. Hopefully 1.5 should not impact him talking, but if he sounds weird, it's because I've sped the video up. I normally watch at 2 times speed nowadays YouTube videos, so but it's really fast and difficult for people to understand. So 1.5 should be okay.
Is Game Pass, or did Game Pass, do devastating damage to the gaming industry? That seems to be the question people have. And I'm going to go into it. What's going on, you guys? Gaming Addict here, coming at you with another video. Today we'll be talking about Game Pass. There's a lot of aspects that comes to this. You know, for those of you who've been living under Raw, Game Pass is a subscription service, provided by Microsoft, where you get access to a variety of second party, and you get all their first party and some third party stuff in terms of what you can play day and date. They have multiple tiers, and for a couple years, people have been like really leaning into whether or not
175 seems reasonable, right? You guys can understand what he's saying. PlayStation killed Sega in the early 2000s. It's killing Xbox right now. And soon it's going to kill Nintendo, yeah? Nothing's going to kill Nintendo. Sony is just changing their path and trying to appeal to more consumers now. Because the PlayStation community isn't enough for them.
a Game Pass subscription model is hurting the industry in any way, shape, or form. Now, I have my own opinions. I'm gonna save it for a little bit later, so let's just get the information out first. There's been a lot that's went down the past couple of days in terms of what's been going on here. You know, from game developers always coming out saying, you know, X amount on Game Pass against it or for it. There's a lot of stuff going on. So I think first thing we're gonna do is talk about Pete Hines' statement. Now, Pete Hines used to work for Bethesda. He worked there for them for a long time. He was with them when Microsoft bought Bethesda, and he left a couple years after that. And now this is like one of the first things he's like really stated publicly about anything. Keep in mind, I don't even think he specifically is mentioning Game Pass. He's talking about subscription services in general. So let's pop over here. So this is an article over there at IGN. Bethesda former senior vice president of global marketing and communication, Pete Hines, says gaming subscription services like Xbox Game Pass are worth jack. You guys know what he says. If the game developers who create content for them are not properly supported, the developers who create content for them, he's talking about developers in general. The ex-Bethesda figurehead who announced his retirement in 2023 after 24 years with the company opened up to the state of the gaming industry in his interview with DBL Tap. In addition to touching in his early days of the company behind Fallout and Elder Scrolls, Hines spoke about how he felt about the future of services like Game Pass looks like. He admits his retirement from Microsoft-owned Bethesda means his view on the matter may not be up to date. However, Hines says he witnessed what he considered to be short-sighted decisions made several years ago that now appears to be bearing out of the way now. Subscription services have become the new four-letter word, right? You can't buy a product anymore, which is not really necessarily true. You can definitely buy products. Hines says, when you talk about subscriptions that rely on content, if you don't figure out how to balance the needs of the service and people running the service with the people who are providing the content, without which the subscription is worth jack, man, he's really liking the cuss, man, jack shit, then you have a real problem. The tension is hurting a lot of people, including the content creators themselves, because they're fitting into an ecosystem that is not probably valuing and rewarding what they're making. So this is what Pete Hines said. Now, I want to go into a little bit on this. There's a couple things that I agree with him. There's some things that I feel, you know, he's speaking solely from the perspective of someone trying to push and make money, as much money as possible.
You know what? I really regret not buying that Starfield Stream Deck. I know you can't get them anymore. I did get the sleeve for the console. I've got the controller, I've got the headset. I do regret not getting the Stream Deck and the mic though. I wish I did. I just didn't have the funds at the time to buy it. It came out at the worst possible time and I couldn't afford it. Sucks!
Well, the biggest thing I'll agree with him is I agree with him in terms of developers. If you don't give the developers what they need to succeed, right here, this tension is hurting a lot of people, and especially including the content creators themselves. Essentially what's going on here is...
not sure, but not sure. I tried to get people on the, like, different people from different podcasts on the show all the time, but timing doesn't generally work. Although I do like to get people that don't agree with me so we can have a good debate. Having people that constantly agree with me generally just creates an echo chamber, and I personally like it when people come with an opposing view so we can actually have a discussion, have a debate. That's what a good debate is, right? When two opposing people come together in a peaceful environment and have a conversation. He is doing better, Susanna. He had quite a bit of health issues, if I'm not mistaken, but he's doing a lot better now, at least from what he seems.
You're putting everything else ahead, especially money, in terms of the people that's actually making the content for you that's going to drive people to your subscription service. Now, that's 100% valid. You know, I've been very clear on this show. I've been clear on this channel that these developers, if they're not supported correctly, they're gonna leave the industry. A lot of these people can make more money out of the industry, have nothing to do with this industry. And I think a lot of people forget that. You know, the gaming industry isn't the only industry that you could code or do art stuff with. You know, there's a lot of other industries that'll pay you more, that you don't have to worry about how the landscaping is. Now, look, every industry is cooked. Every industry chases quarterly bonuses. Every industry wants that, you know, money to be bigger and bigger every quarter. But I will say, I don't see this much spike. Maybe the tech industry. You know, the gaming industry, like, we be laying off these people that are making games by the thousands every year. And to me, especially when you start looking at the vet people been in the industry for a couple years, how are you going to explain to them in the long term of why they should continue to do what they're doing? I don't know. To me,
they're getting a salary. They're getting paid. What more do they want? Maybe their bonuses are now being hit, but that's on the company to, you know, realign what those bonuses should be. That's not a Game Pass problem. That's a management problem. See, this is the thing that people don't get. This isn't a Game Pass problem. Sure, Game Pass is essentially what created the problem, but the management already knew this going into it. They should have had the foresight in changing what those metrics are. And this is what I was talking about earlier, right? What do these companies like Microsoft deem as success? That's the question. No one is asking this question, by the way. You go to any other podcast or any other video, no one is asking this question, and that is the fundamental question that needs answering. What is deemed as success? And it's not being answered. Right? And it needs to be answered, because that's why these developers are in the position that they are. They want additional bonuses. They want their hard work to be recognized. And if they knew what was deemed a success, then they could work towards it. But right now they can't. Right? No one is owed anything. You are paid to do a job. Now, if you are told on your contract when you sign up to the company, hey, you know, there's also performance-based bonuses as well, depending on how the work is, you know, the project succeeds. That being now automatically removed from you is a problem. But guess what? Those games are now coming to PlayStation. Those games, one or two of them at least, are going to Nintendo Switch. They're going to PC. So even though they're not now potentially getting the success that they used to get on Xbox via volume sales, they have the opportunity now to get those volume sales on PlayStation and Xbox and PC. So they've got two other avenues now to make that success, when before it was limited just to one. So Microsoft has at least done that in order to safeguard the developers. I know games going over to PlayStation at the time was a massive problem, but these companies have a profit and a loss, and they need to sell the games in order to do that, because their own profit and loss is not part of the Game Pass bag. Game Pass making 5 billion, 10 billion, 15 billion, 100 billion will not go towards the studios. They get a certain thing, and that's it. But they still need to sell the game in order to make their revenue, right? So that's why they do that early access stuff. That goes directly as dollar sales towards the studio. But now they're releasing those games on PlayStation. This should be much less of a problem. It shouldn't be that big of a problem. Now, that's one way Microsoft has tackled this and resolved this, which I'm perfectly okay with, by the way. I think that's a good move. But what Microsoft needs to decide and articulate is what is success in a subscription model. Is it 5 million people playing for more than an hour each? Is that what is deemed a success? Or is it 10 million people playing more than 5 hours? Is that what their target of success is? But they need to define it. And obviously it changes from game to game, but they need to provide some guideline of what is success. And the moment they do that, that's it. Every rhetoric about Game Pass bad goes away instantly. And anyone that does try to argue about it is basically being stupid and an idiot. They're just doing it for the sake of doing it. Okay, that's my rant out of the way. Continue.
Doesn't will look well, man. It doesn't look well. So then, essentially, what happened there is then Sean Layden, person that over there used to be head of PlayStation, had a lot to say about that. Now, I'm not going to go too much into Sean Layden because I do feel that there's a lot of scenarios where it does seem like anything related to subscription services in general. And I don't even think Sean Layden has an issue with Xbox. I think Sean Layden has an issue with subscription services. So then this is what happened is...
No, Sean Layden absolutely has a problem with Game Pass. He's shitting on it every single opportunity he gets.
We got a conversation from Shannon. Now, Shannon used to be part of Xbox for a considerably amount of time. And this is what she said. This is all LinkedIn, if I remember correctly. As a long-time first-party Xbox, I can...
In third-party games don't really factor into this. It's first-party only. The third-party companies get a massive cache of money that goes towards them that usually covers, especially with indie, it covers their full development cost. 9 out of 10, it covers their development cost. They have no complaints. But someone like, say, Playground for Fable, they will not have their development costs covered. They need to make up that money through unit sales. And if that doesn't happen, or through microtransaction, then that becomes a problem. And this is why my question to Boom on Monday was, for live service games going day and day on Game Pass, that's fine because microtransactions make that money back in no time, right? People will spend. Just look at Helldivers 2. 50% of their revenue came from microtransactions, people buying the war bonds. But if it's a single player game like Indiana Jones, where does Machine Games make their money? There's no microtransactions. There's no additional sales. The only option they have really is early access. And they made bank on early access, right? They made bank. Same as Starfield. They made bank on early access. But unlike Starfield now, which does have microtransactions with the creation store for you to buy your mods, they're making money through that, and that's an influx of revenue that continuously comes in. But something like Indiana Jones doesn't have that luxury. So where does that game make its money? Outside of unit sales, it can't, because the Game Pass bag isn't there for them because they're an in-house studio. That's the problem that they're having right now. Get an opinion? But the studio still has its own P&L, Vince, and that needs to be balanced.
Test of what that P. Hines is correct. I could and maybe someday write pages on the weird inner tensions Game Pass creates. Shannon Lock is head of World Edge and maker of the Age of Empire games. So keep in mind she's been here for a while. She currently leaving doing something else. Now I'm kind of curious on what she says on the inner tensions Game Pass creates. Now there has been developers saying that they are looking to develop games a little bit differently because they know that because they are so accessible with Game Pass that they want to make sure that anyone that downloads the game is going to understand going out the gate. I think that's more of an issue. Onboarding is an issue in any game. It doesn't really matter what you're doing. So I don't know if necessarily that's something that you can use in this particular thing. Look, this is
and this is another thing. They said, Peter Hines said this and other people said this. It provides tension. What does tension mean? No one actually delved into what tension actually means. It means what? Like all of this conversation and drama that's coming up with Game Pass, no one is actually coming out with the kahunas to say, this is exactly how Game Pass is affecting it. Here's an example of X in real world example. This is how it eventually went with Y, and this is the resolution of what happened to X once it got to Z. There are real world examples out there, but none of these people are coming out and saying, yes, this is the problem. Here's a real world example of what happens because of Game Pass, and this needs to change. All they're coming up and saying is, well, it provides a little tension. Do you know what that tension means? When you're making the game, you have to make it in a different way. And it's what Machine Games was saying, right? Machine Games said when they tackle, and you know, when Christian ran off with we know that Game Pass players jump in for 5 minutes and then leave. What they meant by that was we have, because it's a subscription game, we have to tackle this differently. We can't tackle it the same way as we would do with a box product. Because if you've paid your money for that game at 60, 70 bucks, you put it on for 5 minutes and then turn it off and walk away, they don't give a shit because they've got your money. But in a subscription service, they do give a shit because they want to make sure that you stick around because they need you to stick around. A lot of these contracts are based on performance on Game Pass. So what they will do is try to make that initial encounter, the initial opening salvo, as enticing as possible to keep you on board. And that's what they did with Indiana Jones. They made it really well designed and it was really well done. And so it kept the player base engaged long enough for the area of the game to open up a bit more and for you to enjoy it even more. But you have to tackle it differently. Is that what they mean when it comes to tension? Maybe. It's just so vague, you don't know. And they didn't bother explaining. They never dived into it.
People are not going to like me. Does Game Pass hurt the gaming industry? I would say yes, but it's mainly in terms of sales on the Xbox platform. Clearly, they're cannibalizing sales on their platform. Now, people can sit there and say, you know, oh, that's not true. No, it's true. It's just, I don't know to what margins it is. I don't know if, you know, people that would have necessarily would not bought a game, people maybe ain't taking as much risk. I have seen, in my opinion, covering the gaming industry the past few years, just content creators in comment sections.
You know, credit to him. He's telling the truth. It does cannibalize sales on your platform. Like I said, I don't buy as many games, and I know a number of people that don't because, hey, if I'm playing it on Game Pass, it's a single-player game, it's a one-and-done game, why am I buying it? Unless you want it for your collection. But you're not going to have every game for your collection. Whereas if it was a paid product, all the way to the end, you'd be paying for it.
Says when a cool indie comes up on the scene and they say, well, you know what, that looks interesting, but I feel like that's something that's going to be in Game Pass in a couple months, so they don't buy the game. Now, is that the grand scheme of things across the board? No, I do.
That happens a lot. That happens a lot. I've seen it so many times on Twitter where people turn around and go, is this game on Game Pass? No, just buy the game. Nah, I'm going to wait like 6 months to a year. It'll be on Game Pass eventually. I'll play it then. It's clearly cannibalized.
You personally believe that if a game isn't in Game Pass and that gamer doesn't buy it, he probably wasn't going to buy that game before. Now, I do think there is some like split right down the middle where it could either go either way, but in my opinion, those individuals probably weren't going to buy that game from the start. Now, doesn't mean every one of them. I'm sure there are some people that would have picked up, like, you know, right now what's going on with Xbox and Hollow Knight Silksong. Like, I'm sure that did cost the developer and Microsoft some money, but
Infinite Hero, you're absolutely right. But to the average consumer, and this is what I always say, why do you care? When it comes to all of this in the grand scheme, why do you care? If you're enjoying your game and you are playing it, whether it's through the subscription service or you're buying it, it makes no difference. You are still playing the same damn game. There's no difference to the game. If I went and bought a physical copy or I played it through Game Pass, I am playing the exact same game, getting the exact same experience. So ultimately, I'm going to go for the cheaper option because that's common sense. Now, if you are one of those people that want to own a physical copy, then the other option makes more sense. But ultimately, as a consumer, you shouldn't care. This whole topic that's being discussed right now isn't from a consumer perspective. It's from the developers and the executives' perspective. This is where he's coming from, and this is the explanation that I'm giving. Absolutely right. From a consumer standpoint, none of this should matter to you. You know, Doc Dark said it in the previous video as well. None of this should matter to you at all. Like, none at all. Like, none of it should matter. Because why should it?
And not even necessarily the developer, because Microsoft gave the money. But I don't think that just because those individuals didn't pick up the game, because keep in mind, Xbox has the lowest hardware. So it's like, how much could it be, you know, hurting the industry in general? Now, like I said, we can make the agreement.
That's the other thing. People are going as low as 22 million Xbox Series consoles sold. How can Microsoft possibly hurt the industry? You've got, what, 70 million PS5s out there that are in homes? Maybe, give or take. With it just doesn't make sense. That would hurt. People not buying games on those 70 million consoles is hurting the industry more than Microsoft's 25 million. I mean, they say 22 million, they say 25 million, they say 28 million, they say 30 million, they say 35 million, they say 40. I mean, the number of consoles sold by Xbox changes exponentially depending on what day you're actually asking people. So it ranges from 22 million all the way up to 40 million. That's a big, that's like, the difference is like double, but people change it as they go along. Yeah, that's why I left about 10 million in warehouses, Woodpit. So if Microsoft's dead, right? I mean, people keep saying Microsoft is dead. Their their console base and their user base is really small. How can something that small as a user base kill the industry, affect the industry?
That, in my opinion, that there are some people on Xbox that would have bought that game if they had to. But I don't blame those people. When you give someone the ability and the service such as like Xbox Game Pass, why would that person be buying stuff like that? And people like to look and say, well, why aren't people upgrading consoles? Everyone's on the Xbox One, everyone's on the PlayStation 4, no one's getting next-gen hardware, no one's buying new games. You don't have to look far to find the culprit for that. And in my opinion, it's not Game Pass. It's games as a service. Fortnite, Apex Legends, Call of Duty Warzone. There is a variety of games that have come out that are on previous gen, from Minecraft to GTA 6, that you don't necessarily need to upgrade. Now,
right. And that's where it is, right? That right there is the problem. You've got MMOs. I played, like, I remember 1 year, I played the majority, I think 90% of my gaming time was with Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail. Free to play. I didn't play anything else that year. Right? And then I kind of stopped playing those games and went up. But these free-to-play service games, they are constantly releasing updates, constantly providing you with ways to enjoy the game, constantly providing you with ways to keep you engaged. They're basically keeping you locked in. On top of that, you play MMOs. I played Final Fantasy XI for 7 years, and it was the only game I played. I barely played anything else. I jumped into the other Final Fantasies, but my playtime is near enough 1.5 years. That's just playtime. Someone in chat work out what that is on a calculator for me, please. In Final Fantasy 14, I've got a crazy amount of playtime. Over a year in that 10 years that I played it. Right? If you're playing these games, these are the ones that are taking you away from those other paid experiences. Not Game Pass. At least Game Pass is making some money. But those other games, they're the ones that are changing the industry, taking you away. FIFA is another one. Like, I know people that literally just play FIFA, or my uncle, may he rest in peace. When he passed away, we went to his house for a wake. His kids and his wife was there, and they put on his PS5, right? And the only game he had on there was UFC. He had FIFA, and he had one other game on there, and that was it. That was all he played. That was all he played. And he's had the console from launch, and he was a gamer. But that's all he played. That's all he wanted to play. That's 13,149 hours. That's crazy. But you see, this is what's taking people away from these AAA games. Like, why would I go buy Kronos now? Which I am going to buy. It's priced at 50 quid. I think that's a fair price for that game. And I think games should be around £50. At £50, I'm more willing to just invest in the game now and play it sometime soon than if a game was 70, right? But why would I jump into that now when I've got a brand new update now released on Genshin Impact, which will provide me with, I don't know, 10, 15, 20, 30 hours of gameplay? That's about 2-3 weeks of gameplay for me with my time, you know, with the time that I've got. I'm already secured there with that free-to-play game that I don't have to invest a single dime in to play. This is where the industry is going bad. Because these other games like Fortnite, Apex Legends, gacha games are taking your time because the barrier to entry is free. And as long as the game is good, they are keeping you engaged. They are taking you away from the paid products. It's not Game Pass that's ruining the industry. It's not Game Pass that's damaging the industry. It is these free-to-play games that is actually doing it. They are the ones that are moving it away. Look at the first Ascendant. That went from a game that was supposed to be a Destiny killer to now become pretty much the biggest Guna game on the market. It's trying to compete with games like Azure Lane, believe it or not. Nothing will ever compete with Azure Lane, but at least it's trying to compete with Azure Lane. And it knows its market. It's definitely gone for the Guna squad, and it's doing well enough for it to get updates and continue moving forward. You've got games like Warframe still tricking along, free to play, and they offer you way more than games like Destiny do. Why would, you know, this is the biggest problem. I blame gacha. It's not just gacha bags, but gacha has definitely blown up since Genshin Impact. Technically, you can blame Breath of the Wild because Breath of the Wild is what gave gacha the reason to exist. There are just too many single game gamers nowadays who don't need to buy other games. Dude, that's it. There's so many games coming out. Like this month and next month, how many games are coming out? It's crazy. There's no way you can fit all those games in. You can go buy them day one. You're not going to play them all, though. The average person just isn't going to play all of the games. So what you do is you wait until you're ready to play it. And the problem with that is, eventually time passes, and then you're like, you know, I really wanted to play that Hogwarts Legacy, but it's now, you know, this game is coming out now. I don't know if I want to spend 50 hours in that game when this new one is coming out. And so then those games start getting pushed aside, and then you don't invest in them at all, even if it is on sale. Wilds for me was great. Was a great buy. Way over 500 hours. Should I buy anything when I'm still playing? Exactly. These are the points. These are the points. I want to get into Metal Gear Solid Delta. I'm going to get into that in a little bit after this, and I think that's going to be the final thing I do. But I actually have a big problem with the Metal Gear Solid Delta, which is why I'm happy I didn't purchase it. Most Hoyoverse gamers are free to play. They are, because that's the market that they... I mean, Hoyoverse was... well, they became the quickest company to reach $5 billion capital ever. They made it in 6 months. They reached that point in 6 months, and they became the fastest video game company to do it. It's crazy.
We've seen when they do release something in this generation only, in the current generation, like the college football game, when that came out the first year, I was told specifically that all console units skyrocketed that month. But when you have the biggest games in the industry that are always available on previous gen, and you never have to upgrade to buy them, why would people buy them? And I think that's your biggest culprit. And keep in mind, back in the day when, you know, these consoles sold more games and they sold more hardware, Fortnite, I would say if you made a next gen Fortnite, I don't think they would ever do it because, you know, business wise, it makes no sense for them to do that. Just think about just how many people would upgrade just for that game. But how many people would they lose that don't upgrade? You know, something like Fortnite, you don't necessarily have to make a next gen only game, a next gen only format. And I think that's the biggest reason that we're seeing in the industry is these games you don't need current gen. You can play them all last year. Hell, half of them you can play on the phone. So I think that's the biggest place that you guys need to look a magnifying glass in. It's not Game Pass. It's not EA Play. It's not Ubisoft Premium or whatever they call that thing. I'm sure you guys put in the comments corrected me. It's games as a service. It's the free-to-play market. That has done more damage. And I'm not even saying that subscription services have done no damage to the gaming industry. I would willing to bet you if you went and you really looked up numbers, you could find some damage that the subscription services have done. But you could probably times that by 10 and multiply that by 5. And it wouldn't even touch what the games as a service and free-to-play market's done to the industry. I would say that it's done some good. For instance, crossplay. I don't think crossplay would be where it is without Fortnite. But that's really about it that I can think of. Now, they have showed effective ways of having a games as a service. They've showed effective ways of doing, season passes, and they've done online subscriptions themselves. But I think you guys need to look more into that. That's just my opinion on the matter. But yeah, put the comments below what you guys feel. Very curious your guys' opinion. Like, look, I get it. Shannon, Pete, first off, they're going to speak from the executive level. And I think Pete Hines has always been a stand-up person. And I believe what he says. Look, it is causing some friction at these studios that are making these games. I don't know what to degree, and I don't know to what measure that's been going on. And I agree with Shannon. As far as like Sean, like I said, I don't know. Sometimes it's hard for me to take what he says serious. He kind of contradicts himself a lot in the industry. But hey, put the comments below what you guys feel. I'm very curious, you guys. But if you guys enjoyed this video, hit that like button.
It's a good video. And I agree with him. I do think that the problem here isn't Game Pass. It never was. The problem is the other games taking you away from the paid product. And maybe, just maybe, right? Hear me out here. Maybe these companies, instead of trying to increase their game to 70, 80, 90, $100, how about lowering the cost of entry to 40, $50 so more people can buy your game? Experiment with that idea. Release a AAA game, price it at $39.99, and see how many people will just buy it because the entry is way lower. Anything below 50, and then it starts to become an impulse buy. At 20 or below, that is an impulse buy. But the moment you're going near that £100 mark or $100 mark, that's when you start to think, am I going to play this right now, or should I wait for a sale? And that impacts metrics and sales for the studio. But if you price it at a point where the game is accessible to way more people, people will buy more. I've been saying this about the gacha industry for ages. They price their skins at like £100 a skin. I ain't buying a single one at that price. But then they turned around at Christmas last year and put the skin at £8. From £100 to £8. Everyone on the server bought one. Everyone. There wasn't a single person I saw that didn't have that skin on. Everyone bought it. Which, it just completely validates what I'm saying. If you make the barrier to entry low, more people are inclined to spend to go into and try it out. You spending £100 and then not liking the game is a massive hit on your wallet. But you spending 30, 40 quid, lessons learned. But you won't feel as bad. But what if you really enjoyed that game? Then you'll go and buy, like, I don't know, if it has a battle pass, if it has like a DLC deluxe upgrade, you'll increase your spending on it. Right? There's just so much more that you can add on to it if the game is successful and if you enjoy the game. There's avenues of spending. But these companies only look at, no, I want that initial revenue. And the problem with that is it comes at a cost. Not everyone is going to spend $100 on something with the knowledge that they might not like it. So they wait for a review. And if the review is fine, then they'll consider it. And if they can't afford it, they're still going to wait for a sale anyway. Or they're going to go and get it through other means where it comes for free. And that completely defeats the purpose entirely. But of course, all these companies, these people, not companies, but these people are going to blame Game Pass. Do you know why they're going to blame Game Pass? Because they can't blame a free-to-play game. What are they going to say? I mean, look at it. They tried with Silksong. They turned around and said, Silksong is bad for the industry because it's priced at £16. They actually came out and said it's hurting the industry because of its price point, and it sold millions. That game sold gangbusters. The studio is happy with how, over the moon with how many copies they sold. They made a wad of cash. Now, I'm not saying for AAAs to be priced at that low point, but the point still stands. How is Hollow Knight Silksong hurting the industry? All it's doing is reinforcing the trope, the rule that if you spend less, if you price your product at a reasonable price, you will sell more. If you price it at a premium, you won't. I mean, that's literally it. They don't want to talk about the bloated budget of these games that, due to overhiring it to shorten the length of production, spent big on marketing and constantly changing. Yeah, the cost of gaming isn't cheap, but you will sell more. The average attach rate for a game today is about 1 to 4% of your user base because of the price point. Your console user base, any game that sells above that is an exception to the rule, right? Or it has an IP that is really, really popular, that it's going to do well regardless. But the general attach rate is between 1 and 4%. But if you reduce the cost of that game from 70, 60 down to 40, that attach rate would probably double or triple. It would probably triple or even quadruple, because more people will be inclined to pick up the game day one because it's within their budget. And you just make more money. But corporates don't see it like that. They want instant gratification.